All right. Today is Thursday, September 10th, and I have good news. We are pretty much through with mitosis and meiosis. Thank goodness, am I right? We are moving on into more specific, like what's good and bad about asexual and sexual reproduction. I really like this lesson. I think it's a little bit easier on the brain, so have no fear. Okay, you should have done your bell ringer already, which is about meiosis. So sorry. We'll be okay. And now we are going to go through our guided notes. So let's get into it. So, like we've been talking about for the past, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks, maybe even, there are two ways that living things can reproduce. It can either be by asexual or sexual reproduction. Okay, so the main difference, and we've talked about this a good bit, the main difference between asexual and sexual reproduction is that with asexual, you have just one organism all by itself producing identical offspring. So like if you see this picture here, we've got this little green guy. I don't know what he is, a germ, a cootie, I don't know. And he makes offspring, he makes children all by himself. He doesn't need any help. And those children or offspring, look at them, they look just like their daddy. Okay, so the difference between that and sexual reproduction is with sexual reproduction, you have two parents, and they contribute a sex cell or a gamete to create a genetically unique offspring, and they do that through meiosis. So you need two parents, just like in this picture here. They combine their sex cells to form an offspring who has genes that are from the parents but are not identical to the parents. So like we have a blue and a pink, and they mix and you've got a purple. It doesn't happen exactly like that, but we'll talk about that later on. We don't have to worry about that right now. Okay, one thing I wanted to throw at you just to kind of mess with your brain right at the beginning. Sexual reproduction, humans use sexual reproduction. Of course, you can't just pop out a baby on your own. You need a partner. Plants, most plants, do this as well. So, when you hear about pollen, that's the stuff from plants that often makes your allergies act up, that make you sneeze. That is actually the sex cell of male plants. So the pollen has to combine with the egg to make a new plant. I know. So when you have pollen going around through the air, that's actually plant sperm that's making you sneeze. Kind of weird to think about, but it's true. Okay, one helpful thing before I move on to help you remember which one requires a parent, which one doesn't. The prefix A, just the letter A put before a word, that means without. So if something is reproducing asexually, they are not having sex. It's that simple. Okay, so there are actually a few different types of asexual reproduction, and we're going to learn 4 of them today, and they're pretty easy, thankfully. So the first one we're going to talk about, and remember these are all asexual reproduction, what we're going to talk about here in the next couple of slides. The first one is called binary fission. Now binary fission is what bacteria are going to use to divide and to make new identical bacterial cells. So binary fission, that sounds like a super fancy term. When you see binary, bi just means 2. And fission means it's just separating and splitting off into 2. So you have 2 new cells that are being made. All that happens, I'm going to move myself again, is that bacterial cell, that parent just divides. Like if you look at this GIF over here, we have a bunch new bacterial cells dividing and dividing and dividing and growing in number. Kind of scary to think about. So that is the first type of asexual reproduction. That is used by bacterial cells. Okay, the second one, this one is my favorite. It's called budding. So during budding, An organism is going to create a tiny buddy off of its body. So you see how SpongeBob here just makes more SpongeBobs? That's exactly what's happening. So this right here is the most common example of something that uses budding. This is called a hydra. It's actually an animal. It looks like a plant, but it's an animal, and it is so tiny you have to use a microscope to see it. So how hydras make new hydras, they literally grow a new hydra off of its side, and then that new hydra, or that bud, is going to grow and grow and grow until it is a full-size hydra. And it's just going to pop off and be its own hydra. And of course, since it's asexual, it is genetically identical to the last hydra. This one I actually have a little video of. So this here is a real hydra, and you're looking at it underneath a microscope. That's how tiny it is. And right here on the side is its bud. It's growing a little buddy off of its side, and it's going to grow and grow and grow until it is its own hydra. Kind of freaky. I'm glad humans don't do this because that would be disturbing, seeing like little Miss Long growing out of my side. Hard pass. Okay, the next one is called spores. You may have heard of this one before. So a spore is just a cell that can survive harsh conditions, meaning if it rains, it snows, it's going to be okay, it's not going to be hurt. Spores come from plants and they come from mushrooms. Now, you might be like, what the heck, you literally just told me that plants use sexual reproduction. So different types of plants use sexual reproduction, different types of plants use asexual reproduction. It all depends on the type of plant. So you may have seen, let me move my big head, you may have seen these types of leaves before that have little brown spots on the bottom of leaves, and you might have wondered, what the heck is that? Or maybe you thought they were bugs. Those are actually spores. So that spore is going to leave the leaf. It is going to drop somewhere in the soil or maybe the water. It depends on the type of plant. And that thing is going to dig into the soil or be buried in the soil and eventually grow into a brand new plant. Mushrooms also have these. If you ever picked up a mushroom on the side of the road or, I don't know, just seen a picture of them, they have these little brown things on the, like underneath the big top of it. And if you see this GIF right here, those little particles floating around, those are spores. So those are going to drop out of the mushrooms and eventually sprout into brand new mushrooms. Kind of cool. Okay, this last one is called vegetative propagation. Sounds very fancy. Vegetative propagation. Whoa, what does that mean? So when you see vegetative, just think vegetable, because this has to do with plants. And propagation just means that you are literally taking a piece of that plant and moving it into new soil. And that piece of that plant is going to grow a brand new plant. So if you look at this picture here, this shows a really good example of it. Here is a plant, I don't know what kind, it looks like broccoli, I don't know. They cut the stem of that plant and they rebury it in brand new soil. And that piece grows a brand new plant. It's not the same plant, but it is genetically identical. Also, if you've ever had a potato sitting in your pantry for too long, you may have seen it grow those ugly little sprouts. That's actually your potato trying to grow new potatoes. Kind of nuts. So that is, again, asexual reproduction. Okay, last slide here. Let's compare asexual to sexual, because we talked about the different kinds of reproduction or the different kinds of asexual reproduction, and we talked about how they're actually different, but there are actually different advantages or benefits for both types of reproduction. So like, why is it good to reproduce asexually, or why is it good that this organism reproduces sexually? So in this table here, we have different advantages or good positive things, benefits about a certain type of reproduction, asexual or sexual. And so in this table here, we have a list of advantages or benefits good things that apply to either asexual or sexual reproduction. It's not both, it's one or the other. So we're going to put an X beside asexual or sexual for each advantage so we know which one that applies to. Okay, so the first advantage is quickness. This type of reproduction happens quickly. That is going to be your asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction takes a little bit longer. I mean, think about yourself. You had to be inside your mother's stomach for 9 whole months. That's a lot of months. That's not fast. Asexual happens rapidly. Think about that binary fission. Look at how quickly that bacteria is reproducing. It happens quickly. So that is asexual reproduction. That's an advantage. This next one produces genetic variation. So their genes in the offspring are not identical to the parent. They are genetically diverse or different. That is going to be the sexual reproduction because their offspring are not identical. Why is that an advantage? Like, who cares? It actually ties in with the next advantage really well. Increases chance of survival in changing environments. Let me say that again. Increases chance of survival in changing environments. Oof. That is also going to be sexual. So what do we mean by that? Let's take a look at this picture here, and let me move myself. Okay, so here we have 2 populations. Group A reproduces asexually. We know that because they are all identical. All those bugs are blue. Group B here reproduces sexually because they have genetic variation. They do not all look the same. They are diverse. Now, why is that a bonus? Why is that a good thing? Let's say for both groups, a new type of bird joins their area. And that bird really loves to eat blue bugs. And it's going to ignore all the other color of bugs. What would happen? All of those bugs in group A are kind of screwed. Like, they're all going to get eaten. But in group B, you're going to lose what? 2 bugs? Your purple bugs are going to be fine. Your yellow bugs are going to be fine. Your green ones are going to be fine. Just the blue ones are going to be affected. So if you have that genetic variation and something in the environment changes, whether that's a new predator coming in, maybe harsh weather, and some organisms are more able to adapt or withstand that harsh weather than others. It can be a number of things. If you have that variation or those differences, your whole population is a lot less likely to be totally swept out. Because this group over here, if that bird likes blue insects, they are gone. They're done. Extinct. Finished. So that's a good thing to have that genetic variation. Okay, moving myself back up. This one, a little bit easier, does not require a partner. We already know that is asexual reproduction. Why is that an advantage? Because sometimes some people can't find partners. It's like that easy. It takes a lot of effort for some organisms to go out and find the partner. It takes time. Where if you reproduce asexually, you're just like, I think I'm going to have an offspring. And bam, you have an offspring. It's just a lot easier. So that's a benefit. That's an advantage. Last one, does not require complex structures. That's also your asexual. What do we mean by that? So think back to when we were talking about the beginning of sexual reproduction. We said females have the egg cells, males have the sperm cells. The female egg cells have to be produced in the ovaries. The sperm is in the testes. Like, we have all these extra body parts and all these extra cells that have to be made for any of this sexual reproduction to even happen properly. With asexual reproduction, you don't need all that. I mean, think back to like the bacteria. It just happens. Or the hydra. It doesn't need all those extra like complex structures and body parts. It just starts growing a hydra off of its side. So that's an advantage. Now, last blank. If that type of reproduction doesn't have that advantage, then that is considered a disadvantage. disadvantage. Okay, so for example, it is a disadvantage that sexual reproduction takes a long time. It's not quick. It is a disadvantage that asexual reproduction has no genetic variation or variety or diversity. There's so many words you can use for that. Last one, it's a disadvantage that sexual reproduction requires all of these crazy complex structures. It's not really a good thing. It makes it harder. Okay, that's it. So if you have any questions about anything we covered today, whether it be the advantages, disadvantages, different types of asexual reproduction, hit me up. You know where I am, and we will practice this tomorrow.